Order. Could everyone leaving the chamber bear in mind that Parliament is still in session? That includes guests leaving the gallery. The next item of business today is a members' business debate on motion number 8323 in the name of Jackie-Baillie on discontinuation of Home Office's Go Home campaign. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would be grateful if those members who wish to speak in the debate could press the request to speak buttons now. I call on Jackie-Baillie to open the debate. 7 minutes, please, Ms Baillie.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I am an immigrant, born in Hong Kong to a Portuguese father and a Scottish mother. I came to this country in my teenage years, quite a long time ago, some might say. But this is my home, and this is where I choose to live. This is where I choose to bring up my family. So when the Home Office say, go home, what are they saying to me? But more importantly, what are they saying to people who are seeking asylum? Many are fleeing from violence. Many are fleeing to save their lives. The reality is that many will not see family and friends again. These are the tough choices people face when they seek asylum. Some of us are just about old enough to remember the 1970s. The hate-filled and toxic rhetoric of the National Front, telling the newly arrived visible minority immigrants to go home. I don't accept that this is in any way a coincidence, which makes the campaign all the more appalling. It is beyond belief that the Conservative Lib Dem coalition would borrow from such right-wing racist ideology. The campaign, for those who missed it, consisted of mobile billboards in London and a pilot poster campaign in the Glasgow and Hounslow reporting centres. The billboards asked, in the UK illegally, go home or face arrest. Now there's subtlety for you. Or how about the posters in Glasgow? One said, is life here hard? Going home is simple. Another said, this plane can take you home. We can book your tickets. Or another again, going home is as easy as 1, 2, 3. That is what one Scottish refugee council client, a woman awaiting asylum, had to say about it. The signs were everywhere in the Glasgow reporting centre, on the back of chairs, on the walls and on the steps. I had my 3-year-old with me, and he kept asking me what all the signs said, where the footprints on the floor led. There were huge pictures of homeless people, and I didn't know what to say to him. And what can you say about a crude, insensitive, utterly appalling campaign? Theresa May should actually be ashamed of herself. It was, I think, a personal error of judgment. She signed off the vans, she signed off the slogans, she signed off the funding and defended them for months until her recent U-turn. It is fair to say that the billboards triggered a storm of protest across the UK, and it triggered successful challenges of the government, firstly in the courts, determining that the Home Office had acted unlawfully by failing to have due regard to its public sector equality duty. Secondly, the Advertising Standards Authority determined that the figures quoted for arrests could not be substantiated and should be withdrawn. The ASA also concluded that the Home Office must not run the campaign in its current form again. This campaign had the potential to damage community relations, and it had the potential to incite hatred amongst minority communities. But of course, that is part of a wider, more worrying approach by the UK government, which nurtures, I believe, a deep and persistent hostility to migration and especially to those seeking asylum. Let me turn to the immigration bill in a second. Let me turn to the immigration bill currently before the UK Parliament. There are provisions in that bill that would command support across this chamber, but there are others that are deeply concerning. Let's take the sections on residential tenancies, where a duty is placed on private sector landlords and housing associations to check and monitor the immigration status of prospective and existing tenants. Little practical support from the Home Office and the prospect of a £3,000 fine for failing to do so. This will undoubtedly lead to discrimination in such housing and is totally impractical idea to burden landlords with no experience with immigration matters in this way. I'll take an intervention.
Liam MacArthur.
to Jackie-Baillie for taking an intervention. Taking her back to her point about the use of inflammatory language, with which I entirely concur. Does she think that referring to British jobs for British workers falls into a similar category of politicians using rhetoric that really is rather irresponsible in a broader context?
Jackie-Baillie.
Can I say I don't agree with you, but I do believe we need to get beyond the populist rhetoric and come up with evidence-based solutions. And let me be clear, because I think we all accept that there are people who come into the country that do not have protection needs and should therefore return to their country of origin. But that's best done as part of the routine assessment that's done by a Home Office decision maker and the person seeking asylum, not through generic advertising of the kind we witnessed with the Go Home campaign. Presiding Officer, I want to finally explode some myths on immigration. Myth 1. Many immigrants come to the UK as benefit tourists. The truth is, only 38,000 claimants out of some 1.5 million people claiming job seekers allowance came from other countries. Myth 2. Immigrants are a burden on the UK economy. The truth is that immigrants contribute more than they take out of the economy, estimated at some £25 billion in the last decade alone. Myth 3. Most immigrants to the UK are somehow unskilled. The truth is that 32% of EU immigrants and 43% of non-EU immigrants held a university degree, compared with 21% of the UK population. Myth 4. Most immigrants come to the UK and don't work. The truth is, in 2012, labour market participation for foreign-born people was 73.7%. The unemployment rate was 9.3%. Statistics that almost perfectly match those with the rest of the UK population. Presiding Officer, it is appropriate to have controls. It is appropriate to tackle illegal immigration. But we do need a mature debate and policy that is based on evidence and understanding rather than ill-informed rhetoric. I move the motion in my name.
Many thanks. This is a heavily subscribed debate. I have a number of members who wish to speak. Speeches of 4 minutes or less, please. I call Christian Allard to be followed by Kezia Dugdale.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome this discussion today brought forward by Jackie-Baillie on the discontinuation of the Home Office Go Home campaign. This is our last day of debates in the Chamber before Christmas, and I have a message of goodwill for Jackie-Baillie. Feliz Natal. A Merry Christmas from a new Scot born in France to an MSP sharing our Portuguese identity. These last remarks require a explanation, Presiding Officer. My mother, like Jackie-Baillie's father, is Portuguese. I'm sure we share some of the same childhood memories of fado, strong Christian faith and dried figs. I like to think that the main reason why I decided to pack my suitcase and leave to settle abroad came from the fact that my Portuguese grandfather did the same thing before me. This Portuguese tradition to consider the world as a good place to live is very much the same tradition that I found here in Scotland. Jackie-Baillie and I must have many relatives in South America, just like most Scots have many relatives in North America. I see Scotland as a Portugal of the British Isles. Fortunately for the people in Portugal, decisions are not taken in Madrid. This is what this debate is about. The poster campaigns in Glasgow did not originate from this Parliament, but from the Home Office in London. Like the Scottish Refugee Council, I was appalled by the Home Office Go Home campaign. But it did not come to me as a surprise. The rhetoric around refugees and migration south of the border has been hotting up for some decades. This campaign is just the logical progression of the debate taking place at Westminster. The first mistake, I don't know why I give them the benefit of the doubt by calling it a mistake. The first mistake is to mix two separate issues into one. And I hear Jackie-Baillie in an introduction making that mistake. We need to separate migration and the right of asylum. The second mistake is to make this issue a political argument. And then we heard something in these benches about it. And political argument to win votes. And the last mistake is not to realise that once you have started this negative campaign of fear against a group of people, it is very difficult to stop. I heard a lot of ideas from people offended by this Go Home campaign. We might have had to have our own campaign. Welcome to Scotland. We want you to stay. We need you to stay if the Home Office campaign had not stopped. We all agree in this chamber of the valuable contribution that refugees can make here in Scotland. I have ventured out of my own region to visit a very active group of refugees and asylum seekers in Meadowhall in Glasgow. I made them laugh when I told them, presiding officer, that I became an MSP without having to prove my identity. My French passport was not needed. This is how inclusive a society we are, and we should celebrate this more often. This was one of the conclusions reached at the Share Our Day Migrants in Scotland event last Tuesday here in Parliament, where the Minister did speak. We, as politicians, have got the biggest responsibility in keeping the political debate free from negative campaigns of fear towards refugees and migrant communities. We must debate these issues, but with a different tone. I, for one, do not blame the media down south. The media only reflect what the political establishment in London are saying day after day. We can't help what Westminster message is, but we can make sure that every political party in Scotland take another direction when talking about refugees and migration. My message to media in Scotland: we want you to report the positive message coming out of this chamber. This message is based on facts. In the report of the Scottish Refugee Council in search of normative refugee integration in Scotland, you can read in page 118 how refugees see Scotland and how they feel welcome, and we are saying the problem is the Home Office. And you can read in the New Scots Integration Refugees in Scotland Communities from COSLA, Scottish Refugee Council and Scottish Government, the same vision about how we can do better things in Scotland that is done at Westminster just now. And you can read about the same thing in the Scotland future. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, I'm afraid that Jackie-Baillie is not going to be happy with me. I'm not going to give a Christmas card to the member. Instead, she will give a message by email. A message explaining that I choose to drive to Peterhead and to give a cheque to the local fishermen mission. There I learned that there will be a very special Christmas lunch to all the foreign crews working in the fishing industry, an industry dear to me. An industry would have not survived over the years without the migrants who choose to come and work in Scotland. What a wonderful Christmas message from the Brutune, from Peterhead, a message of thanks for all the people who came and choose to live here in Scotland.
I'm sorry, I've been rather lenient with Monsieur Allard. I'm afraid I can only give other members up to 4 minutes. Kezia Dugdale to be followed by Alex Johnston.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and congratulate Jackie-Baillie on securing this debate and giving Parliament an opportunity to express our collective anger at this insensitive, callous and ill-thought-out campaign. Like many others in the Chamber, I'm sure I received substantial casework from people complaining about this campaign and wrote to Theresa May asking her to withdraw it. I got a very cavalier response from the UK Immigration Minister Mark Harper, who argued that he felt this was the majority opinion of the British public, that this message should be promoted. And I think that Parliament today will speak out in stark contrast to that perceived belief. I chair a national organisation called Movement for Change, which is all about community organising and empowering people to effect change in their own communities. There's numerous strands to that campaign and includes some of the work I've done around payday lending. There's other work around housing standards. There's a specific stream of work around the refugee community in London, where we've been working very closely with the Refugee Council to help support destitute women in London. And one of those women is Teresa Nadwaru. Teresa was a Napier University student in the late 1980s, and she studied and completed a Masters in Water Management. She's an incredible woman. She's published several books. She's a highly intelligent and dignified woman who went back to Rwanda and had a very successful career. And then things started to change in Rwanda, and she faced horrific systematic abuse and had to flee the country, coming back to the United Kingdom. And she's lived without recourse to public funds in London for 12 years now. I met Teresa in the House of Commons, where myself and Stella Creasy were running a training workshop with these women around how to empower them to take part in the political process. Presiding Officer, the posters in the Home Office building in Glasgow's Brand Street said, "Is life here hard? Going home is simple." Yes, life here is hard for Theresa, but she can't go home. There's no way she can go home. What she needs is a government that's on her side. What she wants is to be able to contribute to British culture and society. What she wants is to connect and integrate. If she can't have that, she at least wants a government that understands her life and how she finds herself in the United Kingdom and on what terms. That's what the London Refugee Women's Forum exists to do. It's about building the confidence of the women, giving them the power, the skills and the ability to articulate what their life is really like and speak truth to power. It's about tackling the injustice of women who face destitution every single day. And at the moment they are working to make their own submission to the Home Office Committee's inquiry into asylum. And it's that type of work that I think is critically important. And I really welcome the opportunity that Jackie-Baillie has given Parliament to let me tell that story today. Thank you very much.
Many thanks. I call Alex Johnston to be followed by Christina McKelvey.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The poster campaign mentioned in the motion is one that I welcome the discontinuation of. It was a decision which I think was right and appropriate. However, the nature of the debate that's been brought before us today is one which I find difficult to accept. First of all, let me lay a few myths. As a Conservative, I am not opposed to immigration. I see Scotland today as a country which, in some of its regions, has a chronic labour shortage, and the movement of labour around Europe, particularly within the European Union, is a boon to many businesses in parts of Scotland who simply wouldn't have a business if they couldn't employ Eastern European labour. Similarly, I believe that this country has a proud record of providing asylum for those who require it. In fact, I would suggest that the last Labour government has a question to answer in regard to its treatment of refugees. Its tendency to accept asylum seekers into this country, give them homes, give them their children school places, and then take years to decide that they were not entitled to asylum in this country, resulting in people who had been here for many years being deported at short notice, was in itself cruel and unusual treatment. So the Labour government that we had previously doesn't have an unblemished record. What we see today, however, from Jackie-Baillie is, as other speakers have said, an attempt to confuse and conflate a number of issues. And the issue of illegal immigration is one that we should be prepared to address in a sensible and fair manner. It's reasonable that any country should have rules governing who can and cannot enter as an economic migrant, and those who seek to bypass the system with bogus asylum claims or simply bypassing the entry points of the country altogether should stand up to the full force of the law. It's important that those who are not entitled to be here and cannot justify their presence are given the opportunity to return to the country from which they came. There's another part of this motion this afternoon that I'm concerned about, and that is the one that makes reference to the behaviour of the National Front back in the 1970s. I'm just about old enough to remember how the National Front behaved in the early 1970s, and I wouldn't wish to compare anyone with the way they did. But I understand that there are certain words on the posters which may give the opportunity for those to compare. However, if we look at the action of the Labour Party in opposition south of the border today, we can see them reacting to the proposals to change rules in advance of the 1st of January, reacting with procrastination, if nothing else. And what's driving that, other than fear of the advance of the UK Independence Party south of the border? So yes, I believe that we need to have a much purer view on what constitutes a legal immigrant or an illegal immigrant. We need to accept those who are part of our economic process. We need to welcome those who are entitled to seek asylum in this country. But synthetic outrage and failure to see the big picture does nothing to deliver for these people.
I now call Christina McKelvey to be followed by Liam MacArthur.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, I would like to add my thanks to that of my colleagues, to Jackie-Baillie, for bringing this very important debate to the Chamber, and especially at this time of the year. Yesterday was International Migrants' Day, and our day was celebrated in this Parliament on Tuesday night, when with the Scottish Refugee Council, Migrants' Rights Scotland and Migrants' Voice and a number of eminent academics, we debated with Humza Yousaf, the Minister of International Development, the very positive impact new Scots have brought to this land. The warm stories of the welcome they received were tinged with the harrowing stories of the treatment meted out by the Home Office and UKBA. And let's just get one thing straight, and other people have said it today, migrants in Scotland contribute far, far more to our society than they take out. And that's just a plain fact. Yesterday, when we were celebrating the positives of migration, David Cameron and his anti-EU pals in UKIP were heading to Brussels to tell the EU what to do. How confrontational, how nasty can they get? Some people describe UKIP as the tail wagging the coalition dog. I actually described them as an irksome flea on the tail wagging the dog. Well, we saw how nasty they can get with the Go Home campaign, vans and posters and billboards. What a disgusting exercise using the language of the far right in such a campaign. It's just absolutely abhorrent. Today, in the Migrant Voice website, in a blog by Pinar Aksu, he said, let me read exactly what he said, and this is a quote, an actual quote from his blog. Is life here hard? Going home is simple, which is one of the taglines from the Home Office campaign. Once again, here I am, outside the Home Office at Brand Street in Glasgow. This is where I used to come with my family every Monday after school to let UKBA know that we were here and not running away. This is where I witnessed how some people on this planet have no feelings. Their hearts have been replaced by cold stones. They don't believe you, they don't listen to you, they treat you as a number, and by they I am referring to those who work for UKBA. If they were part of this world, then they could understand the reasons why people seek asylum, not for fun, but for their safety. It has been 7 years that I have been involved with campaigning for asylum and human rights. Every time I come to Brand Street, I feel different. It brings back memories when I was an asylum seeker and how my family were treated. Nothing but a piece of paper. Sometimes it hurts being here, knowing that this disgusting treatment is continuing. Many families being sent back, many dreams being locked away. Trust me, UKBA, you are not being helpful at all. Once again, this is why I'm here again, standing shoulder to shoulder, supporting those who must witness posters saying "Go home" in Glasgow and London. I find this disgusting and humiliating, and I'm not alone in thinking this. The Scottish Deputy First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, and others mentioned how she was unhappy with what was going on. Meanwhile, the Minister for Immigration, Mark Harper, replied back to Ms Sturgeon saying it was for the failed asylum seekers to return home easily and with dignity. I want to clarify something here. Why would someone who runs away from a war zone or from any other difficulties want to go back? Why would someone want to leave their homeland and face difficulties in another country? I suppose no one will understand this unless they carry a brain and a heart with them. I only ask for one thing: bin those posters. It is disgusting to see such a thing happen in a country with human rights. Let me tell you one final thing. No one in this world would want to leave their sweet home out of nowhere and move to another country to be treated like an animal. For those who came up with clever ideas saying, "Is life hard here? Going home is simple," why don't you go and see if life is hard where I came from? Presiding Officer, getting back to Christmas, do you think UKBA would have turned Mary and Joseph away if they had sought asylum in this country? I wonder. And I know Jackie-Baillie will not agree with me on this point, because the only way to move away from the anti-EU, anti-migrant, right-wing danger, which is Westminster, is to vote yes next year.
Thank you. Before we move on, to allow me to call the number of members who still wish to speak in the debate, I'm minded to accept a motion from Jackie-Baillie under Rule 8.14.3 that the debate be extended by up to 30 minutes. Jackie-Baillie.
Can I so move, Presiding Officer?
Many thanks. Is Parliament agreed? We are agreed. I now call Liam MacArthur to be followed by Patrick Harvey.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'm conscious that James Dorn and Neil Findlay also lodged motions, but can I congratulate Jackie-Baillie not only on lodging the motion but securing this afternoon's debate. Can I also thank the Scottish Refugee Council for what I thought was a comprehensive, detailed and generally very measured briefing. The SRC condemn the Home Office campaign for the, quote, crude approach and sensitive tone and the real distress and trauma it caused, and I think this sums it up pretty much perfectly. It also helps, I think, explain the response to the campaign, not just in Scotland, as Jackie-Baillie's motion acknowledges. The backlash was UK-wide, and as the SRC say in their briefing, it triggered a storm of protest across the UK, particularly in London. I mean, there's so many aspects of the campaign to criticise, but the sheer predictability of the fallout makes it all the more galling. It is clear Home Office ministers quite demonstrably did not seek views across government, and certainly not from across the coalition. But to compound this, and in breach of the public sector equality duty, they did not even bother to seek the views of those working in the sector. It's quite clear at this stage that the reputation and the work of the Home Office has been undermined, but more worrying still, those working on its behalf, including the likes of Refugee Action, contracted to run the Assisted Voluntary Return Scheme, have suffered damage as well. We should not lose sight of the fact, as SRC and Jackie-Baillie acknowledged, that there are people who do not have protection needs and should return to the country of origin. But this is best achieved through dialogue, confidential dialogue, between refused asylum seekers, their advisers and Home Office staff. Wider communications can also, I think, play a useful role in this, but not when they are as hostile and generic as those used in the Go Home campaign. The evidence shows not only were the posters, the billboards, the leaflets inflammatory and offensive, they could not even lay claim to have been effective. Refugee Action made clear that this campaign has, quote, diminished levels of trust in our service and reduced take-up of the assisted voluntary return. Of course, the language that we use has understandably attracted, or the language used in the campaign has understandably attracted most of the criticism. Again, as Jackie-Baillie rightly highlighted, the Go Home rhetoric had very uncomfortable echoes with the sort of rhetoric used by fascist movements down through the years, notably from the 1970s. But it is also, I think, allowed a conflating of issues of asylum and immigration to take place. And as Christian Allard, I think, was right to say, this debate is one we do need to have. It's serious issues that cannot be ducked and must not be oversimplified, but it requires all politicians to take care in the language we use. Illegal immigration is a problem. It requires to be tackled. For example, I think the removal of exit checks was a mistake over successive administrations in the 1990s, and I think this does now need to be reassessed and redressed, and I think will be key to restoring public confidence in this area. I think in relation to certain rogue employers, to bogus colleges, there have quite rightly been action taken by the UK government to address shortcomings in those regards. But it needs at all times to be a debate that's characterised by fairness and balance. I think it's worth mentioning, passing the welcome of the end of child detention as part of the coalition agreement. The practice at Dungavel and elsewhere was utterly reprehensible and a scar on our conscience. So there are issues that we need to continue to debate, difficult decisions we need to take, but the serious risk arising from the Go Home campaign is that we make this task more difficult. In a second, Jackie-Baillie, we make the task more difficult and in the process cause unnecessary risk and anxiety to many vulnerable people who already feel under threat and others who have and do make such a significant contribution economically, socially and culturally to both Scotland and the UK as a whole. And I give way to Jackie-Baillie.
Briefly, please, Jackie-Baillie.
I welcome Liam MacArthur's comments. Would he agree that the housing provisions in the immigration bill are actually inappropriate, and will he encourage his Lib Dem MPs to vote against them?
Liam MacArthur.
I think such a broad dismissal of the provisions in relation to housing in the Immigration Act, it would be wrong. If there are specific aspects of it that need to be reviewed, I'd certainly be supportive of that. But I don't think we should simply tread on eggshells on this. There are issues that need to be addressed, and I think some of those are being taken forward in the Immigration Act. I hope lessons will be well learned, that will be spared any repeat of this sort of lamentable campaign in future. But meantime, can I thank Jackie-Baillie for allowing us all to get some of these frustrations out of our system ahead of Christmas. Thank you very much indeed.
Many thanks. Patrick Harvey, to be followed by James Dornan.
Can I express my thanks to Jackie-Baillie for bringing this motion for debate to the Chamber, and my dismay that one member of the Chamber has chosen to describe the reaction against this despicable campaign as synthetic. I think it's very, very clear that the reaction was comprised of very genuine, very sincerely felt anger, disgust and dismay at the nature of this campaign. There is, of course, a distinction between the mechanisms of asylum and immigration. But there is an overlap in the way these issues are politically debated. And why? Because one of the most powerful forces in both debates is racism and xenophobia, and the way in which those forces are manipulated and whipped up by certain elements of our political culture and of our media in the UK. And we do need to recognise that. I want to direct my remarks to the asylum system because of the particular viciousness of the use of images of homelessness to intimidate asylum applicants and their families in Brown Street. What is the asylum system for? That's what we need to address. That is what is challenged by this campaign and by the years of policy which preceded it under the current and the previous UK governments. An asylum system should be founded in compassion. Its purpose should be to give asylum to those who need it, not to refuse it to everyone for whom an excuse can be found to give the refusal. And that's, I'm afraid, the latter is what we have at the moment in this country. We have an asylum system which has morphed into what is little better than a human stock-taking exercise, where individuals working within the system are under constant pressure to say no at every opportunity, and where applicants are forced to go over absurd hurdles, barriers to justice, which a Scottish person, a UK citizen, seeking justice in our courts would never have to experience. Issues around stress, around translation, around representation, things which they should have access to and which they don't, and which give a lack of justice in the system. There should be justice as well as compassion. And for the same reasons that we say in our criminal courts, it is better that occasionally a guilty person goes free than that innocent people are convicted. On the same principle, it is better that some people who might not have a well-founded claim end up being given leave to remain than that people who face genuine fear of persecution are sent back to face it. And if we rebalance that, then we would have an asylum system that's based on compassion and justice rather than the shallow, self-defeating principles which those who whip up racism and xenophobia in this debate have managed to achieve. Let's acknowledge what has been done to the asylum system over the years. Those images of homelessness being used to intimidate applicants are so vicious, not just because they cause fear, not just because they're distressing, but because they recall the fact that destitution has been a deliberate act of asylum policy in this country for years. The reality of destitution, not just the image of it. Those images are so capable of causing fear because the reality exists on our streets. It has existed for years. It will exist this Christmas as it has done for Christmases past. And whether in the context of the UK or perhaps more easily in the context of a Scottish asylum system, this must be reversed. Years of racism and xenophobia in the asylum system must come to an end.
Thank you. I now call James Dornan to be followed by Hansala Malik.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Like others, I'd like to start by thanking Jackie-Baillie for bringing this motion to the Chamber. I have to say that when I came in here today, I didn't expect the Portuguese theme that I've heard already, and unfortunately I'm going to continue it, yes. As many of you know, I was overseeing my brother getting married on Wednesday, and it's just when I was thinking about it, there Michael is an immigrant to Portugal. You know, he's over there, he's been there for nearly 40 years, he's made a life for himself. But more interestingly, because it's right that we recognise very clearly there's a distinction between immigration and asylum. Michael's partner, Ro, stayed in London because he was a refugee from Salazar. He couldn't go back until the dictatorship had fallen, and that's when they moved over to Lisbon. So people we know are affected by this all the time. And that made me think about it on a personal level. But the difference between asylum and immigration does have to be at the forefront of this, because it has been conflated. It's been conflated by politicians for their own ends, I believe, and it's something that we have to make sure that we recognise there's an important difference there. I first heard of the campaign when a constituent contacted my office to tell me about the posters, and I was like most people I've spoken to, and certainly everybody in the chamber so far has also been appalled that such messages were being used at all, but particularly here in Scotland. I wrote a motion, I wrote twice to the Home Secretary asking her for justification for the posters, and I'm still waiting a response. I feel a bit peeved. I mean, Kezia's had one, Nicholas had one, and I've not had a response from MD. I also wrote
Full names, please, Mr Jordan.
My apologies, Presiding Officer. I also wrote to the then Minister for Crime Prevention, Lib Dem, Jeremy Brown, after some encouraging newspaper comments from him. Unfortunately, since then, he's been removed from office. I'm sure that's just a coincidence, but of course I welcome, like everybody else does, the Home Office decision to discontinue the Go Home poster campaign and the commitment by the Scottish Parliament to condemn this pilot programme. However, the intent of the campaign, as well as being appalling and insensitive, was clear. We don't want you here. And these posters just added more fear and distress on those who already are living life on the edge while seeking asylum in the UK. Rubina Qureshi from Positive Action on Housing said it well when she said of the rhetoric, "As we all should know, Go Home is a well-known racist taunt that has been used for decades in this country by fascists and racists against those of us from immigrant communities. That a government agency should decide to take up the same racist and xenophobic refrain while processing would be refugees to this country is shameful and deeply offensive. More than being shameful and deeply offensive, I believe it actually is harmful to both the reputation of the country and, more importantly, the well-being of the asylum seekers. I doubt it ever once crossed the mind of the Home Secretary and our officials what feelings, use of language such as "is life here tough for you, we can help you go home" would stir up for people where that is not an option at all. For men, women and children who have fled for their lives, who have been separated from their family or seen their family killed. It's this lack of compassion from Westminster which appalls me the most about this campaign. Along with condemnation almost totally across this chamber and the third sector, this campaign was also condemned by the Herald. And I want to quote from their editorial of the 30th of August, which I think captures public feeling about this perfectly. Quotes, "What is particularly offensive about this is that these adverts, which are also being piloted in London's Hounslow, appear to be directed at asylum seekers who have fled their countries of origin because they were no longer safe there. These are people whose claims are being processed by the UK government. What point can there be in urging them to return to countries where they could be tortured, imprisoned or killed?" End quote. This ties with statistics from the Home Office, which shows that within the top 10 countries where asylum seekers come from includes Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, China, Syria, Bangladesh and Afghanistan. Countries where significant human rights abuses have been and continue to be documented. Are we really saying that these people should be pressured into going back there? As we know, the majority of asylum seekers in Scotland live in Glasgow and they form less than 0.5% of the population. If all asylum seekers in the city were put in Hampden Station, in my constituency, in case I've never mentioned it before, it would not even be 40% full. It's clear this is a pilot that was designed not for Scotland, it was designed for the south of England, where UKIP, as already has been mentioned, are a threat to the political status quo.
Mr John, could you start to wind up,
Yes, I will
please?
do. I'm pleased to see the White Paper has, in the White Paper, the promotion of the idea of a truly progressive immigration and asylum system, which takes each application on its merits and it wouldn't be asking people to go home, because we want everyone who lives in Scotland for whatever period of time and wherever they have come from to see Scotland as a home. I support the motion.
Thank you very much. Hanzala Malik.
Thank you and good afternoon, Presiding Officer. Please allow me to thank Jackie-Baillie for securing today's debate this afternoon. Thank you, Jackie-Baillie, for doing that. It's tremendous and that you've taken the opportunity to do this. Just because it's Christmas, it's not to be confused. It's a time for goodwill and happiness for everybody. And it is not to be confused with the Home Office latest campaign to set up, to upset many amongst us in the community. In all my life, I have never imagined that a British government would allow one of its departments to be so cruel, crude, unkind, so out of touch to have this type of campaign. I was shamed and disappointed, shocked. I couldn't believe that we would stoop to these levels in this day and age, but we did. And I hope that many other departments, not only in the UK but elsewhere in Europe, will learn from this, that this is just unacceptable behaviour, and we are not going to tolerate such behaviour. It does not represent our people. It does not represent our nation, and it certainly doesn't represent humanity. I don't need evidence to be told that there is no enough evidence that it hurts people's feelings. And why? Is because I have the evidence. I have experienced and lived the evidence. I don't need to prove that to any department or any Secretary of State who is so out of touch with reality. How many organisations, and of course the Scottish Refugee Council, and politicians around the world have suggested and advised the government of their ill-felt, ill-designed and desperate actions that they have taken. It's unbelievable that the safeguards that are in place in terms of equality issues, the legislation that is there to protect the vulnerable, actually fail to do it in this instance. We have laws in our country. We talk about freedom of speech, but at the same time, we say to ourselves that in terms of racial harassment, intimidation, bullying, there are laws to protect us against that. And I'm surprised that no one's actually taken them to task over this issue down that route. I think people need to consider that for the people who've actually put this together, not just the Home Secretary herself. And also, I think one of the things that people have shared some of their experiences in this chamber. I remember when I was young and when people would say to me, "Why don't you go home?" And I said, "Well, I'm going home later on," because home for me was Glasgow, is Glasgow. However, people see you differently, and that's the issue. That's the issue about harassment and prejudice and discrimination, and how we have to learn and live and teach and change the hearts and minds of people. This type of activity does little to support and help that. And I think this is why it's important. I mean, even now, people will say, "Where are you from?" You say, "I'm from Glasgow." Yeah, but I mean, where actually from? Where actually you from? So, well, I'm from the West End, Maryhill. No, I mean, well, I was born in Govan. No, I mean, what do you mean? You mean, I'm telling you where I'm from Glasgow. But, that doesn't satisfy some people. And this type of propaganda encourages that type of attitude. And I think this is why it was important for everybody to be absolutely clear of what they want to do. And I think the fact that we are debating this today here, I hope and I wish and I pray it will send the right signals to the government, to all governments around the world, may I say, that we have to resist the temptation to go down this route. And I commend the motion. Thank you very much.
Many thanks. Can I now invite Humza Yousaf to respond to the debate? And Minister, if you could do so in 7 minutes, I'd be most obliged.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Of course, I would like to start by congratulating Jackie-Baillie for securing this motion for debate, but also recognising that a number of MSPs have put forward motions on this issue and ran campaigns. James Donnan, who spoke earlier on, being particularly robust in the campaign in Glasgow. So I commend them all for doing that. I very much welcome the opportunity to talk in this and speak and close this debate. I thought some fantastic speeches across the chamber, touching upon their own personal experiences, something that I will do probably as well. But I thought it was almost universal in relation to its condemnation. A campaign so iniquitous, so cruel, so shameful, it really is hard to believe that it's come from a government department. A campaign that genuinely, as Patrick Harvey said, threatened to derail so much of the progress, and probably has derailed some of that progress that we've made to reduce the levels of racist bigotry that we've seen in the past. Scotland does and has had a long history of welcoming people from all over the world, whether they're visitors, students, migrant workers or asylum seekers. We want to be a progressive and socially responsible nation that provides a place of safety for, and fair, humane, sensible policies on asylum. What I would say in response to Alex Johnston's comments, and certainly I don't think anybody in this chamber believes that anybody in the Conservative Party, for example, is a racist. That's not the point that we're trying to make at all. What the point we're trying to make is that use of that phrase, of that language, is one that has been taken from the National Front, has been taken from the British National Party, is one that has been taken by racists up and down the country over the ages and over the years. And there's no way that anybody in government, be they a minister, a cabinet secretary or even a civil servant, would have not known the impact of using that language and why it would have been so hurtful and so offensive. And I think Mr Malik was spot on in his in describing how it made him feel. And much like him, having grown up, born and bred in Glasgow, I've been called every name and every racist slur under the sun. The four-letter word for a Pakistani, I've been called a black bee, I've been called anything that you can imagine from the age of primary school up until a couple of weeks ago on social media. But the one that gets to me the most, and the one that hurts the most, the one that really, I think, grinds against the grain the most, is when you're told to go home. Because just as Mr Malik was saying so correctly, when you've worked so hard for this country, this is your country, you're born here, you're bred here, you're just as Glaswegian, just as Scottish as anybody else. Somebody tells you to go home and you think, what right do they have? Don't worry, I stopped myself. What right do they have, presiding officer, to tell you to go home? And so it does hurt. And you know, I respect that perhaps Alex Johnson also agrees that language was not fair and was not sensible, but more than that, it was actually offensive. I would say we can't take this campaign in isolation. Many members have touched upon this. There is a sense that when it comes to issues of asylum, refugees, but also in terms of immigration, and we don't want to conflate them, but there are similar themes on both issues. On these issues, there is a trajectory that the UK is becoming more regressive. We've seen EU commissioners say that the UK is now being viewed as a nasty country. That is the trajectory upon which the UK is going. And my appeal to colleagues in the Labour Party would be an honest and a sincere one. To Jackie-Baillie, who, between you and I, we have no difference, not an iota of difference, when it comes to how we believe that asylum seekers and those seeking refuge in this country should be treated. We believe that they should be treated humanely and compassionately. But genuinely, I'm worried that the parties in the UK, including her own party, are going on the wrong trajectory. And look, I know she's saying that's not true, but I mean, I genuinely think they're going in the wrong direction. I think they are. I will in a second. I believe they're going in that wrong trajectory. I believe that they're also pandering to that UKIP agenda. And look, I read a quote from Diane Abbott, a very senior member of the Labour Party, and she said, Ed Miliband has made 2 speeches on immigration in recent months. All parties need to be careful of dog whistle politics in immigration, where the text is fine, but the underlying message is one that is not so fine. The rise of UKIP has made people panicky about immigration, but the truth is that the fear of immigration is just that. It is fear. The more immigrants who live in your area, the less likely you are to worry about it. And I'll come to a point from Kezia Dugdale too, but I'll give way to
Liam McArthur.
I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way. I mean, I don't disagree with anything he says, but I would maybe caution against perhaps portraying the situation that somehow the sentiments of people south of the border are very much different from the sentiments north of the border. I mean, as SRC made clear in their briefing, the outrage felt in London was particularly acute, and I think reflects the fact that there are concerns right across the UK about the need to get this debate about asylum and immigration right.
Minister?
I wouldn't disagree with Liam McArthur's point at all. I purposely said political parties. I didn't say British people. I didn't say people in Scotland. I didn't say people in England. I said political parties have to be careful on the trajectory they're going. And Liam McArthur's point takes me also to Kezia Dugdale's point, which I thought her speech was and the story she gave was extraordinarily powerful. She talked about public opinion perhaps not chiming with the Go Home campaign, and by and large I would agree with that. But I think we have to have the honest reality that that many members of the public do have an irrational fear of immigration and what asylum seekers, who asylum seekers are and why they're in the country. I think, though, the defining difference would be how politicians choose to respond to that. I don't believe that a language coming from politicians, particularly the Conservative government, Conservative-led coalition, but the Conservative Party in particular, is helpful to that. Now, what we've seen in this chamber is almost a united front, pretty unanimous display of why we believe that immigration and those seeking asylum should be welcome to Scotland. That's the right political message, and that hopefully filters down to people. And what I would say in my appeal would be, for those that have influence to their parties in the UK, would be to try to translate that same tone, that same feeling to their parties in the UK, because it is not going in that direction. We are going, certainly, we have displayed something in this Parliament that I don't think actually you would quite hear in the UK, certainly not from senior members of the UK government. I will end, Presiding Officer, on saying we did publish the White Paper, Scotland's Future, a guide to an independent Scotland. There, we gave very clearly what we believed were our priorities for asylum and for immigration. On asylum, we believed in closing down Dungavel, a toxic institution. We believed in no longer allowing for refugees to become destitute by providing them, of course, continued support. We believed in no longer doing dawn raids by dragging families and children out of their homes at 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning. We do that because it's not just our legal duty, but because I believe it's our moral duty to do so. It helps us to build a more successful nation based on diverse, inclusive and skilled communities, working not just for economic growth, but better social and cultural diversity. And I'd like to end on what I thought was a very poignant but a very aspirational image that Christian Allard, MSP, painted. He said, instead of having vans driving around telling people to go home, I envisage a Scotland where people are driving around in vans saying, welcome to your new home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. That concludes Jackie-Baillie's members' debate on the discontinuation of the Home Office's Go Home campaign, and I now suspend this meeting of Parliament until 2:30 p.m.